The words hit me like physical blows, each one finding the tender places I'd spent years trying to protect. Still fat, I see. And pregnant? God, Isla, did you really think anyone would want to keep you? Jace stood before me in the market square of Meldor's Port District, Lillian draped on his arm like expensive jewelry, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stand there, 6 months pregnant and trembling, while the man I'd once planned to marry dissected every insecurity I'd ever had. The crowd was watching. Of course they were watching. In Maldiva, shame was always a spectator sport. Who's the father? Lillian asked, her voice dripping with false concern. Or do you even know? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. My hand moved instinctively to my swollen belly, protective, defensive. Inside me. The baby kicked as if sensing my distress, and I felt tears burning behind my eyes. What Jace didn't know, what nobody in that sneering crowd knew, was that the child I carried belonged to the most powerful alpha in 5 territories, and he was standing in the shadows at the edge of the square, winter-gray wolf eyes blazing with barely contained rage, watching the man who dared to humiliate his mate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story doesn't begin in a market square with cruel words and public humiliation. It begins 6 months earlier, in a bedroom in the lower quarter of Meldor that smelled of betrayal and broken promises. Chapter 1. Shattered once more. I'd wanted to surprise Jace. That was my first mistake. We'd been engaged for 3 months, together for 2 years before that, and I'd finally saved enough for the ingredients to make his favorite meal. Braised lamb with rosemary. I'd left work at the textile mill early, practically running through Meldor's winding cobblestone streets with my market bags, already imagining his smile when he tasted it. I should have heard them. Maybe some part of me did, and I just didn't want to believe it. The apartment was supposed to be empty. Jace worked at the merchant's warehouse until the 6th bell. Instead, I heard strange yet familiar sounds coming from our bedroom. Sounds I recognized because I'd made them myself, though never with the abandon, the pure pleasure that echoed down the narrow hallway. My hands went numb. The market bags hit the floor loudly. I don't remember walking to the bedroom door, don't remember opening it. But I'll never forget what I saw. Jace, the man who'd proposed to me on one knee in Whitewood Grove with tears in his eyes, was in our bed. My stepmother's daughter Lillian was beneath him, her perfect body arched in pleasure, her perfectly manicured hands clutching his back. They didn't notice me at first. I stood there, frozen, watching my entire future disintegrate into something ugly and unrecognizable. When Jace finally saw me, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He just stopped, deep irritation crossing his features like I'd interrupted something important. Isla, you're home early. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just annoyance. Lillian sat up, pulling the sheet around herself with theatrical modesty. She'd never liked me. Not since my father married her mother when I was 12 and we moved from our cottage into their house in Merchant's Row. But the smile on her face in that moment was pure vindication. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, she said, obviously not sounding sorry at all. We've been seeing each other for months. We tried to fight it, really, but the bond between us— Get out, Jace said, cutting her off. But to my greatest shock, he wasn't talking to Lillian. I stared at him. What? Get out! He stood up, not bothering to cover himself, and the clinical detachment in his eyes made me feel like something he'd scraped off his boot after walking through Meldor's muddy streets. Did you really think this was going to last, Isla? Look at yourself. Look at fat all over your body. Look at her. Did you honestly believe someone like me would be satisfied with you? The words found every insecurity I'd ever tried to bury. My weight, my plain features, the way I'd always felt like I was taking up too much space in every room I entered. I thought you loved me, I whispered through tears. Jace laughed really hard. I settled for you. There's a difference. You were convenient. Safe. But come on, Isla. You had to know deep down that you were never enough. You ain't chubby, you are fat. I don't remember leaving. Don't remember the faces of neighbors who'd heard the commotion. The way they looked at me with pity and poorly concealed judgment as I stumbled down the stairs. I just remember running through Meldor's streets, my father's house key heavy in my pocket, strongly sure that he would offer comfort, would tell me Jace was wrong. Instead, I was surprised. My stepmother answered the door of the merchant's row house, Lillian's mother, and the moment I saw her face, I knew. She already knew. They all already knew. "Where's father?" I managed to ask. "He's at the Guildhall. And before you start with the dramatics, Isla, you need to understand something. Lillian is my daughter, my blood. You're just some remnant of your father's first marriage to that weak woman from the farming villages. If you think I'm going to take your side over hers—" I turned and walked away before she could finish. I'd heard enough. More than enough. I went back to the apartment I'd shared with Jace, packed a single bag with trembling hands, and left. I didn't know where I was going. Didn't care. I just needed to be anywhere but there, surrounded by the wreckage of my life. I ended up in the Borderlands, 3 days' journey north from Meldor, where the Great Pack's territories met in uneasy truce. The inn was cheap and anonymous, the kind of place where travelers from different wolf territories mingled without asking questions. Perfect. I stayed in my room for 2 days, crying until I had no tears left, staring at the rough wooden walls and trying to figure out how I'd been so blind. Every moment with Jace replayed in my mind with new, cruel clarity. The way he'd sometimes look at me with barely concealed distaste. How he'd suggest I skip dessert, join the running groups that trained in the morning mists, try the fasting rituals popular among Meldor's merchant class. The comments about Lillian's figure? Always followed by a quick, "But I love you just the way you are," that I'd been desperate enough to believe. On the 3rd day, I forced myself to leave the room. Not because I felt better, but because I was out of food and tired of feeling sorry for myself. The tavern attached to the inn was dimly lit and mostly empty, the air thick with pipe smoke and the mingled scents of different wolf packs. I ordered venison stew and bread, found a corner table near the fire, and tried very hard to disappear into the shadows. That's when he walked in. I noticed him immediately, even though I was trying not to notice anything. He was tall, broad-shouldered, moving with a predator's grace that made everyone in the tavern unconsciously lean away. His presence spoke of power, of an alpha's authority that needed no proclamation. But it was his eyes that caught me. Winter gray, the color of storm clouds over the northern mountains, sharp and intelligent, scanning the room with casual authority. And then those eyes found me. I looked away immediately, hunching over my stew, praying he'd choose any other seat in the entire tavern. Of course he didn't. "This seat taken?" His voice was deep, with a rough edge that sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. The kind of voice that could command armies or whisper secrets. I shook my head without looking up, hoping he'd take the hint. He didn't take the hint. He sat down. "You're not from the Borderlands," he said. Not a question. An observation. "Neither are you," I replied, still not looking at him. His scent reached me. Pine and winter frost, distinctly northern pack. "True, I'm just passing through." "You?" "Same." I lied. Most people passing through don't look like they're trying to become part of the furniture." That made me look up, ready to tell him to leave me alone. But when our eyes met, whatever sharp response I'd planned died in my throat. He wasn't handsome in the conventional sense. His features were too harsh, too angular, like they'd been carved from the northern granite instead of sculpted with care. But there was something magnetic about him, something primal that made it hard to look away once you'd started looking. The mark of a true alpha. "Bad breakup?" he asked, and there was no mockery in his voice, just genuine curiosity. I laughed bitterly. "Something like that. Want to talk about it?" "No." "Want me to leave you alone?" I opened my mouth to say yes. Instead, I heard myself say, "Not really." Something flickered in those winter gray eyes. Not pity. Not the predatory interest I'd learned to recognize and fear from other wolves. Something that made me feel like he actually saw me, not just the broken pieces I'd become. I'm Grix, he said. Isla. Well, Isla, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to buy you a drink. A real one, not that sad stew you're drowning in. Blackberry wine from the Eastern Valleys if they have it. And you're going to tell me one true thing about yourself. Just one. And then if you want, I'll tell you one true thing about me. No judgment. No pack politics. No expectations. Just two souls being honest for one night. Deal? I should have recognized the danger in accepting anything from a stranger, especially a stranger whose power radiated from him like heat from a forge. But there was something about the directness of his offer, the unexpected kindness beneath his rough exterior, that made me want to say yes. Deal, I whispered. That night changed everything. We talked for hours. He didn't ask about my breakup again, didn't push for details I wasn't ready to share. Instead, we talked about everything else. The old legends of Maldiva's founding packs, the politics of the 5 territories and their endless territorial disputes, the beauty of the northern mountains in winter, which he described with unexpected poetry. He was surprisingly funny, with a dry wit that caught me off guard and made me laugh, actually laugh, for the first time in days. And he looked at me. Really looked at me. Not at the parts of me I wanted to hide, not with the clinical assessment I'd learned to expect. He looked at me like I was worth seeing. When he told me I was beautiful, I almost laughed, almost told him the tavern's lighting was too dim to see clearly. But the way he said it, the absolute conviction in his voice made the words die in my throat. You don't believe me, he said quietly. I don't understand you, I admitted. Someone hurt you, recently, made you think you weren't worth looking at. He leaned forward, those winter gray eyes holding mine captive. They were wrong, Isla. So wrong it's almost funny. You're stunning. The kind of beautiful that makes a wolf forget his own name. I didn't believe him. Couldn't believe him. But God and the moon goddess, I wanted to. When he invited me to his room, every logical part of my brain screamed at me to refuse. I just had my heart destroyed. I didn't know this man. This was reckless and stupid and exactly the kind of thing that ended badly in every cautionary tale mothers told their daughters. But at the very moment, I didn't care. I said yes anyway. That night, Grix made me feel things I'd never felt before. Desired, wanted, cherished. He touched me like I was precious, like every curve I'd been taught to hate was something to be worshipped. When I tried to turn away, embarrassed by my body in the lamplight, he gently turned me back. Don't hide from me, he murmured against my skin. You're perfect. Every inch of you. By the moon, you're perfect. For the first time in my life, I almost believed it. But morning brought cold reality crashing down. I woke before dawn, Grix's arm heavy across my waist, and saw it. The sigil ring on his finger, gleaming in the early light filtering through the shutters. I recognized it from stories, from whispered warnings my father had shared when I was young, from the history lessons about Maldiva's bloodiest wars. The Vale's crest, the Winter Alpha, the man whose grandfather had led the Northern Massacre 30 years ago, the pack that had slaughtered hundreds of southern wolves in the territory wars before an uneasy peace was brokered. Horror flooded through me, cold and nauseating. I'd slept with the enemy. No, worse than that. I'd opened myself up to him, shown him my vulnerabilities, let him touch the broken places inside me. What would the members of Meldor Pack say if they knew? What would my father say? How could I have been so stupid? So weak? I dressed in silence, my hands shaking so badly I could barely lace my bodice. Grix stirred but didn't wake, his face peaceful in sleep, looking nothing like the monster from the stories. I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see those winter gray eyes again, knowing what I knew now. I left without a word, without a note, running from the biggest mistake of my life through the pre-dawn streets of the Borderlands. What I didn't know, as I fled into the dawn with tears streaming down my face, was that my shame and regret were small than what lies ahead. And 6 months later, I'd be standing in a market square in Meldor while my ex-fiancé mocked me, completely unaware that someone was standing in the shadows, watching, waiting, and about to remind everyone exactly what happened to people who hurt. Chapter 2. Hunting the Truth. I made it back to Meldor before I allowed myself to fall apart completely. The journey south took 4 days, and I spent every moment of it trying not to think about winter-gray eyes and hands that had made me feel cherished. Trying not to remember the way Grick had whispered my name like a prayer to the moon goddess. Trying desperately to convince myself that leaving was the right choice. The only choice. By the time I reached Meldor's gates, I'd almost succeeded in believing it. I found a room in the lower quarter, far from Merchant's Row and the life I'd lost. The landlady, an elderly wolf named Mrs. Petra, who asked no questions, rented me a tiny space above her bakery, for coins I could barely afford. The smell of fresh bread wafted up through the floorboards each morning, making my stomach turn in ways I attributed to stress and heartbreak. I found work at the textile mill where I'd worked before Joss, before the engagement, before everything. The foreman remembered me and offered me back my old position at the looms. The work was hard, my fingers bleeding by the end of each shift, but I welcomed the pain. It gave me something to focus on, besides the growing emptiness inside my chest. 8 weeks passed in a blur of thread and exhaustion, and then came the morning I couldn't stop vomiting. Mrs. Petra found me on my knees in the shared washroom, heaving into the basin with tears streaming down my face. She took one look at me, her weathered face softening with understanding, and said the words that made my world tilt sideways. "How far along are you, child?" "I'm not," I started to protest, but the words died in my throat. My last monthly bleeding. When was my last monthly flow? The horror must have shown on my face because Mrs. Petra helped me to my feet with surprising gentleness. "There's a healer in the Eastern District. She's discreet. Go see her today." I wanted to argue that it was impossible, that I couldn't be pregnant from one night with a stranger, that the moon goddess wouldn't be that cruel. Not possible. The healer lived in a small cottage tucked between 2 larger buildings, easy to miss if you didn't know where to look. She was a middle-aged wolf with sharp eyes and gentle hands, and she asked no questions as she examined me. When she finished, she sat back with an expression I couldn't quite read. "You're pregnant. About 8 weeks, I'd say." I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. My hand moved instinctively to my still flat stomach. "That's not all," Marta said quietly. "The life force I'm sensing from this child, it's unusual, stronger than typical, much stronger." She met my eyes. "This isn't a pure bloodline, is it? The father, he's not from Meldor?" I shook my head, unable to speak. "Northern Pack?" she guessed, and when I nodded, her expression grew more concerned. "A hybrid, then. That explains the strength. These children, they're rare, powerful, and in times like these, with tensions still high between territories," she trailed off meaningfully. "What are you saying?" I whispered. "I'm saying you need to be careful, Isla, very careful. There are wolves in Meldor who wouldn't take kindly to one of our own, carrying a northern pup. Especially if the father is who I think he might be." My blood ran cold. "How did you— I've been a healer for 40 years, child. I know the signs of alpha blood when I see them. And there's only one northern alpha who's been in the Borderlands recently." She leaned forward. "Does he know?" "No." "Are you going to tell him?" The question hung between us like a blade. Was I? Should I? The thought of facing Grick again, of seeing those eyes and admitting what had happened, filled me with equal parts terror and longing. "I don't know," I admitted. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, hundreds of miles north in the Winter Territory, Grick was standing in his war room, gray eyes fixed on a map of Meldiva, his beta and closest Marcus watching him with growing concern. "You need to stop this," Marcus said bluntly. "It's been 2 months, Grick. 2 months of searching every territory, questioning every traveler, sending scouts to every goddamned village in Meldiva. The council is getting restless. They say you're neglecting your duties as alpha." Grick didn't look up from the map. "Then let them say it. She was a one-night encounter. You don't even know her full name." "Isla." Grick's voice was soft but absolute. "Her name is Isla, and she's not just some encounter." Marcus sighed. "What happened that night? You've never— In all the years I've known you, you've never acted like this over anyone, not even when— Don't. Grick's hand slammed down on the table, making Marcus fall silent. When he spoke again, his voice was raw. I woke up and she was gone. No note, no explanation, just gone. Like she'd never existed at all. But I can still smell her scent on my skin, Marcus. Still hear her laugh. Still remember the way she looked at me when I told her she was beautiful, like no one had ever said it before and meant it. So you fell for a pretty face. She wasn't just pretty. Grick finally looked up, and the intensity in his eyes made Marcus take a step back. She was broken, Marcus. Someone had shattered her, made her believe she was worthless. And when I touched her, when I held her, I felt something I've never felt before. Like finding something I didn't know I'd lost. Like coming home. Marcus stared at his alpha, his oldest friend, and realized with growing alarm that this was worse than he'd thought. Much worse. You think she's your— I don't know what she is, Grick interrupted. I just know I need to find her. I need to know why she ran. I need— He broke off, jaw clenched. I need to see her again. The council won't wait forever. Then they can challenge me for leadership. Grick's voice went cold. I'm not stopping until I find her. Back in Meldor, I had no idea that the most powerful alpha in 5 territories was tearing apart the world looking for me. I was too busy trying to survive each day, to ignore the growing life inside me, to pretend my heart didn't ache every time I thought of winter gray eyes. 4 months into my pregnancy, my belly began to swell in ways I couldn't hide. The other mill workers whispered behind their hands. Mrs. Petra brought me extra food and asked no questions. My father, when I finally gathered the courage to visit him, turned me away at the door with my stepmother's poisonous words ringing in my ears. Unwed and pregnant with some stranger's bastard. You are nothing but a shame to this family. I stopped trying to maintain connections to my old life after that. But I wasn't prepared for what happened on a cold autumn morning in the Meldor Market Square, when I was 6 months pregnant and running out of coins to buy food. I'd gone early, hoping to avoid crowds, my cloak pulled tight around my swollen belly. I was examining apples at a fruit stand when I heard a voice that made my blood turn to ice. Isla? Isla Madencia? I turned slowly, already knowing, who I'd see. Jace stood there, Lillian on his arm as always, both dressed in fine clothes that spoke of his recent promotion in the Merchants Guild. They looked prosperous, happy. Everything I wasn't. I thought that was you, Jace said, and there was a cruel amusement in his eyes as they traveled down to my stomach. My gods, you're pregnant. I tried to walk away, but Lillian's voice stopped me. Who's the father, Isla? Or did you spread your legs for so many wolves after my Jace rejected you that you lost count? The market was starting to take notice. People were stopping, staring, sensing drama the way wolves sensed weakness. Still fat, I see. And pregnant? God, Isla, did you really think anyone would want to keep you? Jace's voice rose, playing to the crowd. Let me guess, some desperate wolf took pity on you for one night, then ran as soon as he realized what a mistake he'd made? My hand moved protectively to my belly. Inside, the baby kicked hard, as if responding to my distress. Tears burned behind my eyes, and I hated myself for letting them see me cry, for being weak, for being exactly what they'd always said I was. Who's the father? Lillian pressed, her voice dripping false concern and mockery. Or do you even know? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. The crowd was growing, whispers spreading like wildfire through the market square. Unwed, pregnant, shameful. And then I felt it. A presence at the edge of the square. A pressure in the air that made every wolf in the vicinity unconsciously tense. The kind of presence that spoke of barely leashed power and absolute authority. I turned, my heart skipping before my mind could catch up. Grick stood in the shadows at the market's edge, his winter gray eyes locked on Jace with an expression of pure, controlled rage. He wore the formal dress of northern nobility, the Vale's crest displayed prominently on his chest, and every inch of him radiated the power of an alpha who'd found someone threatening what was his. He'd found me. After 4 months of searching, he'd finally found me. And judging by the fury in his eyes as he started walking toward us, Jace was about to learn exactly what happened when you insulted the Winter Alpha's mate in public. Chapter 3. No choice at all. The market square fell silent. It wasn't a gradual quiet, the natural ebb and flow of conversation dying down. It was instant. Absolute. The kind of silence that falls when a predator enters a room full of prey. Gricks moved through the crowd like a blade cutting through water, and wolves scrambled to get out of his path. Some recognized the Veil's crest and went pale. Others simply felt the weight of his authority and knew, instinctively, that they were in the presence of an alpha who could end them without breaking a sweat. Jace, oblivious fool that he was, didn't notice until Gricks was 10 feet away. As I was saying, Isla, you really should be more careful about who you— Finish that sentence, Gricks said quietly, and it will be the last words you ever speak. Jace spun around, irritation on his face that quickly transformed into confusion, then dawning fear as he took in the tall, powerful wolf behind him. Who the hell are you? The father, Gricks said, his winter gray eyes never leaving Jace's face. I'm the father of the child you just insulted. I'm also the wolf whose mate you just publicly humiliated. So I'll ask you one time, and one time only. Do you want to keep breathing? The word mate hit me like a physical blow. He'd called me his mate, in public, in front of half of Meldor's market district. Lillian, for once in her life, had gone completely silent. Her face had drained of all color as her eyes fixed on the Veil's crest, recognition dawning with horrified clarity. You're, she whispered, you're the Winter Alpha, Grick Veils. The crowd erupted in frantic whispers. The Winter Alpha, here, in Meldor, claiming one of their own as his mate. Jace looked like he was going to be sick. I didn't know, I wasn't aware, that she belonged to me. Gricks's voice dropped to something deadly. Would it have mattered? Would you have shown her basic decency if she hadn't been carrying an alpha's child? Or would you have humiliated her anyway? Because that's the kind of pathetic wolf you are? Please, Jace stammered. I meant no disrespect to you, Alpha Veles. But you meant disrespect to her. Gricks took another step forward, and Jace actually whimpered. You stand there, smug and satisfied, with your new conquest on your arm, and you mock the woman you threw away like garbage. You have no idea what you had, no idea what you lost. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what was happening. Gricks finally turned to look at me, and the fury in his expression melted into something that made my heart crack open. Relief, joy. And beneath it all, a hurt so deep I felt it in my bones. Isla, he said softly, like my name was a prayer. I've been looking everywhere for you. I know, I whispered. I heard the rumors, northern scouts asking questions in every village, an alpha searching for a woman he met in the Borderlands. Then why didn't you— He stopped, jaw clenching. Why did you run? The crowd was watching, dozens of wolves hanging on every word, but in that moment it felt like we were alone, just the two of us and 4 months of unanswered questions. I saw your ring, I said, my voice breaking. The Veil's crest. I remembered the stories about your grandfather, the Northern Massacre, the war. I thought that I was the monster from your bedtime stories, Gricks finished, pain flashing across his face. That I'd hurt you, use you, destroy you like my grandfather destroyed your people 30 years ago. Yes. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, they were blazing with intensity. I am not my grandfather, Isla. I challenged him for leadership 7 years ago, precisely because I refused to continue his legacy of violence. I ended the war with the Southern Territories. I've spent the last 7 years trying to undo the damage he caused. His voice dropped to something raw. I would never hurt you. Could never hurt you. I didn't know that, I whispered. I didn't know any of that. You didn't give me a chance to tell you. He took a step closer, and I could smell his scent, pine and winter frost, the same scent that had haunted my dreams for 4 months. You left, without a word, without even a God's damned note. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Waking up to find you gone like you'd never existed? I was scared. So was I. The admission burst from him like a dam breaking. I was terrified, Isla, because I woke up that morning planning to tell you that I'd felt something I'd never felt before. That one night with you had changed everything. That I wanted... He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. It doesn't matter now. What matters is that you're here. You're safe. And you're carrying my child. His eyes dropped to my swollen belly, and the expression on his face, wonder, fierce protectiveness, overwhelming joy, made tears spill down my cheeks. Our child, he corrected himself, voice thick with emotion. Can I? He reached out, then stopped, waiting for permission. I nodded, unable to speak. His hand settled on my belly, large and warm through the fabric of my cloak, and the baby kicked immediately. Hard, like it recognized its father's touch. Grick's eyes went wide. Was that? Your pup saying hello, I managed to say through my tears. Something in his expression crumbled. The powerful alpha, the feared warrior, the wolf who'd torn apart territories looking for me. He dropped to his knees in the middle of the market square, both hands on my belly now, his forehead pressed against the curve where our child grew. Thank the moon goddess, he whispered. Thank every god in existence. You're both alive. You're both here. The crowd was deathly silent. Watching this unprecedented display, alphas didn't kneel, didn't show vulnerability, didn't press their faces to their mates' pregnant bellies in the middle of public squares and weep with relief. But Grick's wasn't just any alpha. Come home with me, he said, looking up at me with those winter gray eyes. Both of you. Come to the winter territory. Let me take care of you the way I should have from the beginning. Let me prove I'm not the monster you feared. Every logical part of my brain screamed warnings. This was too fast and too public. But my heart, my stupid, broken, desperately hopeful heart, whispered something else. Okay, I breathed. Okay. The journey to the winter territory took a week, and it was nothing like the desperate, tear-stained flight south I'd made months earlier. Grick's had come prepared. A carriage waited at the edge of Meldor, comfortable and well-appointed, with soft cushions and warm blankets. Marcus drove, shooting me curious, but not unkind glances in the mirror. And Grick's himself never left my side, his hand always finding mine, as if he was afraid I'd disappear again if he looked away too long. We really talked. He told me about challenging his grandfather, about the brutal fight that had left him with scars across his ribs and his grandfather dead on the challenge grounds, about ending the war, negotiating peace treaties, trying to rebuild his pack's reputation from the ashes of violence and hatred. I told him about Joss, about my family's rejection, about the months of struggling alone in Meldor's lower quarter, convinced I was carrying a child who would be rejected by both our peoples. Never, Grick said fiercely when I admitted that fear. This child will be loved, Isla, cherished, celebrated as the bridge between two bloodlines that have been enemies for too long. The winter territory was nothing like I'd imagined. I'd expected something harsh, cold, forbidding. Instead, I found a land of stunning beauty. Snow-capped mountains, dense pine forests, villages nestled in valleys where smoke curled from chimneys and children played in the streets. And Grick's estate. It took my breath away. The main house was built of stone and timber, sprawling but somehow still cozy, with enormous fireplaces and thick rugs and windows that overlooked the mountains. My room, our room, Grick's corrected gently, had a massive bed piled with furs and a view that seemed to stretch to the edge of the world. Is this real? I asked that first night, standing at the window while Grick's built up the fire. It's real, he said, coming to stand behind me. His arms came around me carefully, his hands settling on my belly. You're here. You're safe. This is real. Over the next 6 weeks, I discovered what it meant to be courted by an alpha. Grick's was patient in ways that defied his reputation. He never pressured me for intimacy, even though I could feel the desire radiating from him every time he looked at me. Instead, He courted me. Properly. He brought me breakfast in bed every morning, pastries from the pack's best baker, fruits from the southern valleys, herbal tea that the pack healer swore was good for pregnant wolves. He took me on walks through the pine forests, pointing out landmarks and telling me stories about his childhood. He introduced me to his pack with such obvious pride that I stopped feeling like an outsider and started feeling like I belonged. At night, we'd lie in bed together, his hands on my belly, talking to our unborn child. "Your mother is the strongest wolf I've ever known," he'd murmur. "She survived betrayal that would have broken most wolves. She crossed territories alone. She faced down her fears and gave me a second chance I didn't deserve. You're going to grow up knowing that strength runs in your blood." I fell in love with him more with each passing day. The pack accepted me with surprising warmth. The elderly wolves told me I reminded them of Grick's mother, quiet strength wrapped in gentleness. The younger wolves were simply excited about the air. And the children, moon bless them, were fascinated by my growing belly and constantly asked if they could feel the baby kick. I was happy, truly deeply happy for the first time in my life. And then, 8 weeks after I arrived, everything shattered, once again. It was morning. I was in the garden, enjoying the weak winter sunshine, when Marcus came running up the path, his face pale. "Where's Grick?" he demanded. "In his study. Marcus, what's wrong?" He didn't answer, just ran toward the house. I followed, my heart already sinking, some primal instinct warning me that everything was about to change. I reached the study in time to hear Grick's voice, cold and flat in a way I'd never heard before. "You're certain?" "The messenger just arrived," Marcus said. "She sent formal notice to the pack elders. She's alive, Grick. Halaya is alive." The name hit me like a physical blow. Halaya, his first wife. The mate who disappeared 5 years ago during a border skirmish and been presumed dead. I must have made some sound because both wolves turned to look at me. The expression on Grick's face, devastation, fury, helpless rage, told me everything I needed to know. "Isla," he said, starting toward me. I held up a hand, stopping him. "Tell me." "She's demanding her position be restored, as my mate, as alpha female of the winter pack." His voice was raw. "Pack law is absolute. I'm legally bound to her unless she consents to dissolution." "And will she?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "No," Marcus answered when Grick couldn't. The message was very clear. She expects to return within the week to reclaim what's hers by right. The room tilted. I grabbed the doorframe for support, one hand instinctively protecting my belly. "This can't be happening," I whispered. "We were supposed to... You asked me to... I know." Grick's voice broke. "Isla, I swear to you I will find a way around this. I'll search every law, every loophole. I'll challenge the elders if I have to." "You can't." I cut him off, reality crashing down with brutal clarity. "Pack law doesn't have loopholes, Grick. You told me that yourself. Without her consent, you're bound to her, legally, permanently. Then I'll get her consent. I'll convince her. To give up being mated to an alpha? To surrender her rightful position so you can be with some southern wolf carrying your bastard?" The words tasted like poison. But they were true. "She'll never agree. Why would she?" "Because I love you." The shout echoed through the study. "Because you're carrying my child. Because I choose you, Isla. I will always choose you." "But you can't." I was crying now, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. "That's the problem, isn't it? You can't choose me. The law chooses for you. She chooses for you. Everyone chooses for you except you." I turned and ran before he could respond, ignoring his calls, fleeing to our room where I locked the door and collapsed on the bed that smelled like pine and winter frost and broken promises. The next 6 days passed in a nightmare haze. Grick tried everything, consulting with every legal advisor in 5 territories, attempting to contact Halaya directly, even considering stepping down as alpha to free himself from pack law's constraints. But Marcus and the elders were clear. If he abdicated, it would throw the pack into chaos, potentially reignite territorial conflicts he'd spent years settling. And I couldn't ask him to do that. Couldn't ask him to destroy everything he'd built just for me. On the 7th day, I made my decision. I packed my single bag, the same one I'd carried to the Borderlands months ago, and left at dawn. I couldn't stay and watch Halea return. Couldn't bear to see Grick forced to acknowledge her as his mate while I became the other woman, my child born in shadow. I made it to the Borderlands village, the same inn where this had all started, before I let myself break down completely. And that's where I stayed, working for room and board, my belly growing larger each day, trying to figure out how to raise a hybrid pup alone when my heart was still in the winter territory. 2 weeks later, I needed supplies. The inn's owner sent me to the market square in the nearest town. A different square, a different territory, but somehow exactly the same as every other place where I'd been made to feel small. That's where Jace found me again. I don't know how he knew where I was. Don't know why he'd followed me. But there he stood, Lillian still on his arm like a permanent accessory, and the cruelty in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He'd heard the rumors. About Grick, about the first wife returning, about me being cast aside, and he'd come to gloat. Still fat? Her ex mocked, unaware she was carrying the alpha's heir. The words dripped with venom as he circled me like a predator. Oh wait, that's not quite right anymore, is it? Because the alpha doesn't want you now. His real mate came back. You're just the fat whore who got herself pregnant and thought she'd trapped a powerful wolf. I stood there, 8 months pregnant and exhausted, and felt something inside me break all over again. Who's the father? Lillian asked with false sweetness. Or do you even... A growl split the air, low, deadly. The kind of sound that made every wolf in the square drop to their knees in instinctive submission. Grick emerged from the shadows, and I realized with dawning shock that he looked terrible. His face was haggard, dark circles under his eyes. His clothes rumpled like he'd been traveling hard for days without rest. You, he said to Jace, his voice something beyond rage, are going to run. Now. Because if you speak one more word to her, I will rip out your throat and sleep peacefully afterward. Jace ran. Lillian followed. The crowd scattered. And then it was just us. Me and Grick and the baby between us, and 2 weeks of misery reflected in both our faces. I went back to Halea, he said without preamble. Offered her everything. Money, territory, a house in the southern valleys, complete autonomy and my public acknowledgement of her sacrifice during the border conflicts. He took a shaking breath. She laughed in my face, said she'd waited 5 years to reclaim her position and nothing I offered would make her give it up. I know, I whispered. That's why I left. I told her I loved someone else, that I had a child coming, that forcing this would destroy 3 lives including an innocent pup. His voice cracked. She said pack law didn't care about love, only about legal bonds and proper succession. Then it's over. The words hurt more than anything Jace had ever said. We're over. No. Grick crossed the space between us in 3 strides, his hands framing my face with desperate gentleness. We're not over. We're never going to be over, because I'm done letting laws and customs and other people's claims dictate my life. What are you saying? I'm saying I choose you, Isla Madencia. I choose you over pack law, over my position, over everything. His forehead pressed to mine, his voice fierce and absolute. Halea can claim her legal rights. The elders can challenge me. The whole goddamned world can turn against me. I don't care. You're mine. This child is mine, and I will spend every day for the rest of my life proving that you're worth more than any law or title or tradition. But the pack will follow me or they won't, but I'm done hiding you, done treating you like a secret I'm ashamed of. He pulled back just enough to look in my eyes. I'm claiming you, Isla, publicly, permanently. Let Halea try to take that away. Grick's hand moved to my belly, and despite everything, the impossibility, the danger, the certain chaos ahead, he smiled. Your pup agrees with me. And standing there in a market square where I'd been humiliated twice, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about perfect circumstances or legal rights or laws that made sense. Love was about choice, and Grick was choosing me. Finally, impossibly, I chose to believe I was worth it.